I think it's going to happen. If by that question you mean the right of gay couples to marry in all 50 states, I think that's going to happen much sooner than anyone realized, probably sooner than anyone realized when I argued the Windsor case back last March or when we got the decision in June. It's probably within the next couple of years. There are a bunch of cases now that are percolating their way through the courts, in the 10th Circuit, in the 5th Circuit, maybe in the 6th Circuit. And one of those cases is going to get to the Supreme Court sooner or later. And when it does, I'm quite comfortable that the Supreme Court is going to decide in favor of equality. And at that point, there will be a right to marry in all 50 states. It's an interesting question. There's certainly going to be talk about it, in part because in our society today, when anything happens with Twitter and Fox News and MSNBC, there's always talk about everything. So there's certainly going to be talk about those kinds of laws. None of them, as you know, have succeeded. A couple of them didn't even get through the legislature. It's a big question whether there will be one that actually succeeds. My guess is probably not, but it's possible. And if one does get passed, I'm very comfortable that it will be struck down as unconstitutional. But you know, it's a tough law to pass because the business community today and most Americans today think the idea that you could have a law that would allow a restaurant or a hotel not to serve a gay person just the way they used to not be able to serve African Americans or rent hotel rooms to Jews, I think that offends the conscience of the vast majority of Americans. Well, it wasn't exactly the most stress-free experience of my life. When you argue cases before the Supreme Court, particularly a case like this, you spend about 3 months preparing full-time. And you do this thing that's called moot courts, where you go all over the country, and I did it here about 8 different times at Stanford, at NYU, at Georgetown, and you sit in front of kind of a make-up panel, and they basically spend a good hour beating the you-know-what out of you, and then they spend another hour and a half criticizing everything you've said. So it's not exactly the most fun experience you could ever have in your life, but it was incredible preparation. And even though I'd been so incredibly nervous probably for those 3 months, actually about 24 hours before the argument, I became incredibly calm. And I'm not someone who's really known for my Zen-like properties as a person, so that was itself unusual. And I think the reason is, A, is we've done all this preparation. B, there was something in me that just, whether you call it God or spirit or something, that just gave us all a sense that we were on the right side and that if justice was done that we would prevail. And then third, I had watched the arguments the day before, which were in the California case, and I felt like that was looking pretty good for my case, so I was pretty comfortable there. And I spent actually the afternoon before the argument watching cartoons with my son, which is probably the best preparation I possibly could have done. And then when you get there, you don't have a lot of time. It's 15 minutes. I was probably nervous right at the very beginning, but once you start talking, you know, you kind of go on autopilot. And it's almost, on the one hand, it's the Supreme Court, and it's beautiful and huge and momentous. On the other hand, it's like arguing in any other court I've ever argued in front of. And the judge asks you a question, you got to answer the question. And so it was both an incredibly huge thing and at the same time, like many, many other arguments I've done in my career.